Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namane Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani
I've been asked, finally got here to speak. The Srinavadhan Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtan, this, what we're doing here in this Krishna Conscious Center, gathering together and hearing and speaking. That means first there's a speaker, first there's the sound, and then we hear the sound. But the special, unique nature of what is the opening of the opportunity within the Krishna conscious environment is that the sounds are transcendental, and when properly uttered and properly heard, they bring about a universal transformation within the consciousness, within the heart of both the persons who speak and those who hear. So the life within this material world is the foundation is delusion. Delusion means that one is not understanding the actual reality of what's around us. We're deluded under illusion. And there is something that is always lurking in the background of everyone's feelings, everyone's experiences. In the very least, people will say that they feel an incompleteness. It's universal. If you get to know people, if they open up their hearts to you, if they trust you, if you're trustable, then people trust you more. And then they open their hearts, and almost invariably people will spill out. A very common and predominant theme in today's modern society is that there is an incompleteness, maybe something missing, something vastly missing, maybe a total emptiness. So this is nagging at, pulling at the heartstrings and consciousness of everyone, although they don't like normally to reveal it. It's considered inappropriate, and people feel that it diminishes their stance, their perception amongst others to speak about such things. But it is the reality, and in a society which is striving for enlightenment, such as this Krishna conscious society, we don't say that we're completely enlightened. We can't say that we're very enlightened, but what we can and should be saying is that we're striving for enlightenment. And the key word in enlightenment is the light. Just like we have a prayer, Om Agyana Tiramandasa Gyana Gyana Salakera Chaksurin Nilantam Em Tasmai Sri Gradinima. So we're praying to the enlightened soul, the one who sees things in its truth, sees things in its completeness. And that's enlightened person. There is nothing missing within their consciousness, within their heart. They are experiencing the completeness. There is no void within them. They have the fullness of the awareness of the truth. And hearing from such a person gives us a chance, both by understanding in a cognitive way their words, but more sublimely the power of the words of someone who completely is aligned with the absolute truth. what they speak is the same power, potency, and enlightenment as if the absolute truth. So such persons are rare, and the hallmark of such persons is that they are free from envy, niramatsarana, and that they have no artificial selflessness in them. They have no artificial selflessness. Perhaps the biggest rub between individuals when we're interacting with others, we have to doubt actually what is their motivation. The society brings us to a completely external conception of ourselves and others, that higher purposes that are Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Did I accidentally shut it up? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's starting to sag. It's temperamental. Hare Krishna. Is that working again? So, is it working? It's a simple thing to fix. You should get a new cord. Hare Krishna? Yeah.
Good.
So, we can see in our own self, and we can see in others, that this is a nagging thought, where our sense of being accepted by others is not on a stable platform. It's rather tottering. What is that person's interest in me? You see? So we feel in relationships, and then that actually begins in the reflection in our feeling in our own self, our own completeness of self. That what is that person's interest in me? You see. So the society brings us currently the entire education, including sadly into a predominant degree, although not exclusively, in religious settings and pseudo-spiritual settings. We bring in this thing of what am I going to get out of each transaction? What am I going to get out of each transaction? And we objectify people, that we are thinking, what am I going to gain from that person? We see it, and therefore we see an ever-increasing breakup relationships, an ever-increasing breakup where brothers break up with brothers, men break up with their nephews, they have conflicts, and there is divorce and separation, because we don't understand each other's motives. We don't understand each other's motives, and rightly so, actually. It's rightly so. So the hearing of the sounds that are transcendental, that come from a person who is in transcendental consciousness, not only gives us a cognitive enlightenment to understand what is truth and what is fiction, but it has another effect, a sublime effect. Just like in the night there is darkness, and especially we can see that when there's the new moon and maybe there's some clouds and the stars are obscured, and for our eyes it's very dark and we stumble around, we need a flashlight to guide us. But as soon as the sun comes up, even if it's hazy, even if it's cloudy, then immediately we can start to discern the perception of what is existing. So in darkness, we can't perceive, and as soon as there's light or enlightenment, then we can perceive. So the beginning, we hear this very often, so much of, not so much, but a lot of the Vedic ideas and terms have come into modern usage. Most of them applied in a very slipshod way, like the term guru. So they just, use the term guru. He's a guru of this, he's a guru of that. And it's true, guru means a teacher, but the higher meaning of a guru means heavy. And guru means heavy, one whose knowledge is so heavy, his enlightenment is so heavy, he displaces all the ignorance just by his presence and just by the sound that he emanates. Just like the sun comes up and the darkness is gone. So the first ignorance, and the ignorance that will be with us to the very end, because that ignorance is subtle nature, is that somehow or other we accept this material body as ourself. And in modern society, such a statement, of course, might be appreciated sometimes, but it also is almost like insane. I remember when I was in university, we had to take a psychology exam, not for the psychology department, but they wanted us to take, a mental health survey. And I had already been living in India. This is after returning. And my childhood, I had been practicing yoga. And one of the questions is that, do you believe that there is a spirit that travels along with you? And do you believe that you can sometimes see yourself outside of your body? So for a person, even in the ABC level of spiritual life, the very first premise is what? I am not my body. Ahankar vimudata kartahamita mamite. This is the ignorance. This is the ignorance. But we see everything we manage to do in society, all the activities, that it's actually reinforcing that I'm the body. Maybe not always the gross form of the body. I'm
sorry.
No worries. Maybe not the gross form of the body necessarily, what I can eat and what I can smell and what I can taste and how I can enjoy with others, how I can get a car and attract the opposite sex, or how I can wear these lovely dresses and, attract the opposite sex or get the admiration of others around me. But the second part is how I can, have a different type of enjoyment. So it's all based on enjoyment, but enjoyment of the temporary. So this is the foundation of the material environment. And we think that we're getting an enlightened stage. Some 500 years ago, a few persons were able to create a science of pseudo-knowledge, and they called it science. It wasn't, and the basis of that science was to use the best part of the brain, how to increase the things of the body. So those individuals felt themselves enlightened because they saw persons who gave the best of their intelligence towards spiritual pursuit, towards religious pursuit, towards pursuit which is transcendental to the temporary, they saw those people as ignorant and backwards and less intelligent, foolish, because they didn't use the best of their brain to improve their material situation. So this is not the first time this tug of war has been there in society. But the war actually became one in the beginning of the 20th century, where not in all the countries, but in the countries that were dominating the world, where it was almost a done deal. People thought, yes, the hallmark of the most intelligent persons is how much they have expanding, how much they have the capacity to expand their material situation, and along with it, the enjoyment. So the enjoyment and the material situation goes hand in hand. But the beginning of spiritual enlightenment comes when one understands that all of the things around us, no matter if we're able to manipulate it or not, come to us by the grace of God. This is in the ABCs of real culture. ABCs of real culture. So taking the temporary, we find out that if we seek for happiness in the temporary, by simple definition, happiness of the temporary is what? Temporary. And happiness in the eternal is? Eternal. But we become deluded because in general, in society, we don't have any idea of the eternal. So one of the concepts, one of the words which has become commonplace, somewhat properly used, mostly misused in English, is karma. And along with that, mukti. Of course, that's not as commonly done. And amongst those who are in spiritual pursuit, especially those who are availing in differing degrees, there are some pseudo-spiritual movements, and so they get the idea of liberation. So liberation. So by some process or other, by doing this or doing that, I become liberated from illusion. I become liberated from my karmas, you see. And of course, it's not that we should become liberated from our karmas and again engage in bad karmas. But what is that meaning? Krishna talks about this in his Bhagavad Gita in many places. Mohanir mukta, brahmananda brahmate kona. So one goes through yesham tvanta katam pavam, jananam punyakam, te dvan mohanir mukta. So what is that meaning of mukti? So mukti, we can give an analogy, a metaphor, that the soul by nature is illuminate. The soul by nature is happy. But the soul is put into this material body for reasons that we have to ultimately discover why we are in this material body and how it keeps us from enlightenment. But when we're in this material body, we begin to take on the consciousness of what this material body offers us within the material world. It's something like a dream. We desire to play a role, so the writer of a play writes a part for us, and then we enter into that part, and you keep playing that part, and you keep on playing that part, and when you go home, at some point you can't forget which is the part. You take that part with us. So it's something like a great electromagnetic machine, and then you touch a piece of metal to that machine, and although that metal by nature is not magnetic, when it's in touch with that electromagnetic machine, that metal also develops the same type of capacity as giant magnet. It becomes magnetized. It becomes magnetic. So mukti means to remove that iron from that magnet and let it restore to its nature. That's what it means. So in the past, in previous times, getting liberation was a very laborious process. In the first of the 4 yugas, time, places where the spiritual thing, it took 100,000 years, very ardent meditation. What is ardent meditation? Is that those persons could sit down alone and their minds would be fixed and not move. Try that sometime, just to keep the mind and to be able to completely filter what thoughts you allow to come into the mind. That was their beginning state. That was their platform, that they could just sit down and they had control of their mind and they could sit for 100,000 years, 10,000 years without their minds wandering. See? So, I don't know, we don't want to take an external vote, but we can look at how many minutes in our day can we get where our mind doesn't wander, where we can say, I want you, my dear mind, to just think of the name, Krishna, 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 not wander. Very difficult. See? So different types of austerities were there, different types of penances, and all of which at this time period, with our very short life, has become very difficult. So, God is always merciful. That is perhaps the thing that we have to explore the most in our spiritual pursuit. The foundation of spiritual knowledge is 3 things. The foundation of spiritual knowledge is to understand that everything that we see, although we may be ignorant of that, is the direct creation of God. The second part of spiritual awareness, spiritual knowledge, spiritual understanding, is that because everything that we see is the direct creation of God, just like if I go in someone's house, it's their house, everything in their house belongs to who? Them. Right? It's common sense, like, unless we're of a criminal mind. So, a warped mind, perverted mind. No, wherever I go, anything I see is mine, for me to enjoy. But if we take these 2 propositions and look at them, at least at the first glance, it's not a very good deal for us. God created everything, and therefore He owns everything and it's for Him to enjoy, then where do I stand? It sounds like I've got a bad deal here. That's because in material nature, the living entities within the material nature who are bankrupt in the heart, their happiness comes from taking. But the third point in this 3 fundamental principles of spiritual knowledge is that God is our best friend. God is our best friend. So that comes from experience and utilizing our intelligence as we progress in spiritual life to understand this factor. So this liberation, which is so difficult to come, what is that liberation? What does it actually mean? Liberation means that the machine is turned off, the magnet falls off, and then it can engage in its actual activity. So the actual activity of the soul is not engaging in temporary pursuits of temporary material happiness with the material nature. But the activities of the soul is spiritual, engaging in spiritual activities in relationship to the spiritual supreme and experiencing eternal joyfulness that just increases more and more. So the beginning of spiritual life actual spiritual life, the entryway into spiritual life, is the state of liberation. And we are very lucky that the state of liberation has been bequeathed to us by the generosity of our best friend, who has not given us the short end of the stick in terms of the deal, but he's given us the big end, that everything he's created is for our benefit. Every moment of this life, every breath, every second is arranged sublimely for our benefit, that if we become wise and enlightened, that we will be able to tap into our relation and connection with that supreme joyous being and find that every moment is supremely joyful. And the switch that turns off that magnet that holds us, that binds us, karmana, nibandhana, for eternity, is the bequeathment of this single word, Krishna.
Krishna.
Nam namakari bodhani jasavashaktis. So in the beginning, for myself, 54 years ago, I was traveling in India, in Andhra Pradesh, and I was in a bus, and I was trained before I went, and I was reading, and I saw this circular writing on the side of the roof of the bus, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And there it was, by the mercy of a Vaishnava who had that written in the bus. I said the name Krishna. And although I had no idea what was the power of the name of Krishna, it catapulted a whole series of events. Just on that very day, I got to see in someone's small house where I was paying some money for a meal of prasadam, I got to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his joyful form as Yashoda Nanda, the dear son of Yashoda, with a flute tucked in his belt, and he's wearing a peacock feather, and he looked like a little pirate, and he had some yogurt in his hand, and the flickering of a lamp. I was eating prasadam. And then that night, I had no place to stay. It was the wilderness, the foothills of the jungles, and I stayed in this situation which was horrible. And the man there, he was perpetually dying. I think he was dying for 20 years before I met him. And all night, that fellow, he had tuberculosis, and still he smoked these bidis. And all night, this fellow, he was chanting, Narayan, Narayan. My situation was also hellish. Mosquitoes and bed bugs and like 110 degrees heat with, 90 degrees humidity. And I also was chanting Narayan, Narayan. All because I was riding in a bus, and somehow, seemingly accidentally, I saw the name Krishna and Rama and Hare, and I said Krishna. And without my having any knowledge of it, I was liberated. And a whole series of events transcended, unfolded from that moment. So we're all very fortunate, very fortunate. So Hare Krishna, any questions? Yes?
Well, I was curious, what were you doing in India 53 years ago in the first place?
The short version of the story was that in my childhood, when I was 7, I thought that it was paramount importance that I should navigate my life towards a specific closure. I mean, the whole life should be something that would be of the best possible use. I didn't have the term highest purpose of life, but that's what I felt. And I came to the conclusion that to achieve that, one should perfect selfless service. And I basically had money and I retired. It sounds strange, when I was 13 as a millionaire, gave it away, and then it eventually took me to join the Peace Corps, and they sent me to India.
Okay.
And then I opted to go to the most remote place possible, away from any Westerners, and they sent me into the forests to do agricultural projects, teaching agriculture, organizing villages. So it really didn't have much, I mean, it had to do, the core of it had to do with me. You know, some rightful thing is that doing Sukriti, pious activities, would open the heart for enlightenment, but I had no clue of how that would happen, but it was a good choice. And then Krishna did the rest, right? Our role is 1%, to realize that something foolish is in our life. And Krishna's role through the Vaishnava is 99%. That, yes, oh, see this foolish boy, he comes to me foolish. Like in the Gita, the 2nd chapter. Finally, Arjuna, shishastayam prapanam. Finally, Krishna chastises him. He says, you're acting like such a wise man, you're spouting so many things, but you're doing totally stupid things here. You're acting on the bodily platform. Here I am, God telling you what to do, and you're just worried about the repercussions. You're foolish. And then Arjuna came to his senses and says, "Shut, I'm your disciple." So that the more that we have that realization that without the wisdom and purity that comes from association of enlightened souls, we're nothing. Aham. This is the best mantra for a student. In the morning before chanting japa, aham Buddha, aham Buddha, aham Buddha, I am a fool. What do I know? What do I know? Real intelligence is that in the morning we see, there's so many things to learn, and we are in the pursuit of learning. And at the end of the day, yes, we may have learned those, but then we realize, I'm really a fool. There's so much more that I don't know, especially in spiritual understanding. We should feel as a student, it's not that we come to the point of thinking that, now I'm a master. But as we progress, we come to the understanding is, student is perpetual. Student teacher. Does that help?
That opens up a whole wide range of continued conversation that could take place.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get through my health issues. There's one book which is called The Reluctant Monk, which is an introduction of how Krishna introduced me to, not being offensive to devotees, ultimately it brought me to the shelter of Prabhupada and his disciples. But I was in India practicing Krishna consciousness, as I didn't know it, as a Vaishnava. And somehow my name was Hanuman Prasad, and I was chanting Hare Krishna, Govinda Jaya Jaya. And my groups were distributing Krishna Prasad. So, we were distributing 400 to 700 plates of Krishna Prasadam twice a day, Vishnu Prasadam. So I had no idea. There was this book that I found, the only book in English is called Bhagavad Gita, so I was reading that book. And the only dramas, there was no movies, no radios, no TVs, and the only thing were different things, like one night they were up all night singing the prayers of Kulacheka Maharaj, The only dramas were the Ram Leelas. So, after some time, something happens. Something happens. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, you've been a devotee for over 50 years.
I wouldn't say that I'm a devotee, but in the path.
So all of us have different times of devotional service in our lives. Some of us are younger, some of us are older. And I compare devotional service to sailing. Sometimes we're going fast and the wind is perfect and everything's hunky-dory, Hare Krishna, hey, we're in bliss, everything's fine, and all of a sudden we hit a snag, and then life is full of problems. or in retrospect, we go through the doldrums. Doldrums is when there's no wind, everything is smooth, but everything is very boring. My question to you is, sir, how do we know that Krishna is paying attention to us? Sometimes we may feel, I feel, that, hey Krishna, hello, I'm here, and can you
Yeah,
reassure
so if I'm correct, you're talking about faith.
Yes.
And part of the faith is being able to experience Krishna's presence.
Yeah.
Experiencing Krishna's presence is in two forms, like he's saying in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, I am the taste of water, I am the light of the sun, I am the moon that gives the flavor to the vegetables, like this. So this is the indirect but undeniable presence. And then there's the experience of Krishna personally to differing degrees. One is the Paramatma, means that we see how Krishna is arranging everything for us. And some of that is a process, but my humble opinion, and what I, as a student teacher, always strive for, is to think of Krishna consciousness as creating a building. And in creating a building, the most important part that an architect and an engineer knows is the foundation of that building. So if we expect that there's going to be, like changing situations that might affect the structure of the building, then our first focus is that foundation. So the foundation of Krishna consciousness, how to build that faith, where besides cultivating the emotional side, where we appreciate and have affection to Krishna, is to solidify our understanding of Krishna consciousness to the point where nothing will break it, where it's constant, where it's like a raft, like when we build in marshy areas, like in India, where there's a very high water table, we put pilings into the ground. And then a very intelligent thing is to connect those pilings. You dig down and you connect them, and you actually make like a super raft. So there's nothing in every way. That can't be dislodged. So the process is attentive hearing. So there's an art, and this is described here and there, in part in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The art of hearing is not just to be listening, but to be contemplating. So one of the things when I was a student teacher in Buffalo, we organized 6 classes a day, and one of the things that I encouraged my brethren, God brothers and God sisters, see is the continuity of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Similarly, with Srila Prabhupada, I observed the continuity, how, not just that he was consistent, but you get a total picture. Not just here, snapshot there, but we have it, and nothing will unnerve that faith. The external might come and even bewilder us. They might be so bad that you can't externally think of anything, but internally you have that raft. You have that foundation. It becomes, nothing can budge it. Where we understand that there is no other identity for ourselves than the eternal servant of Krishna. So part of that is the application, being willing to put ourselves, not of our own concoction, but by actual surrender to the test. In all types of circumstances, and when Krishna is kind, he will put us in so many difficulties for the process of, really solidifying that faith. And the other is really rapt attention. And the third part of this is to listen to the Krishna book. Because understanding how wonderful Krishna is the last key. And when we hear, and only the Krishna consciousness movement has this opportunity to directly be able to hear and know what Krishna is doing. Just see Srimati Rukmini. Of course, she is the goddess of fortune herself. So it's not, a full example for us to understand, But in the example that she shows, she was just a young girl. She began this interlude with Krishna. She was 12. She was finally kidnapped when she was something like 14. And of course she exhibited great intelligence. But her becoming enraptured and totally saturated with love of Krishna, in terms of the externals, was that she simply heard about Krishna, about his wonderful pastimes. And hearing those wonderful pastimes, she became just completely dedicated to being Krishna's wife. So the process of hearing and being able to not just have the heart saturated by the purification of that hearing, but also the consciousness aware of directly meditating and thinking of, wow, you see how wonderful Krishna is. But the two go together. As the heart becomes molded, melted, purified, then when we hear those pastimes, they become more and more joyful. That Krishna book is the sealing deal. It's the summum bonum of the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
It is like the Gita is the summum bonum of the Mahabharata. Ostensibly, Mahabharata has so many lessons in Niti Shastra. Valuable lessons, no doubt. Valuable even for our Krishna consciousness, but we don't need those. They're valuable, but we're not required them. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is fully transcendental. Rahasam Tatam, it is, rasa. But the culmination of that Srimad Bhagavatam is having that golden singular opportunity to see and hear the pastimes of Krishna unadulterated. In which we can think, wow, Krishna is my best friend. And it doesn't matter that nothing belongs to me. In fact, it's joyous that nothing belongs to me. It's joyous that Krishna is created, because then we have a salvation. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Tomorrow runs to the south side now.
Okay, so they're going to serve outside. If you like, you can get the sign and take in the community room if the winds too chilly.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. What's your name?
Jai Gosundar Das.
Jai Gosundar. And where do you...
Just relocated here a couple months ago. I was living in North Carolina for the last 20 years. You've heard of Prabhupada Village?
Yes, with Ranjit.
Oh, Ranjit, yeah, now he's in Alachua now. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the archives is there.
So who's there in... Madhukar is in Alachua?
Madhu was still there.
Prabhupada.
Yeah.
And what about Ek? Ek is
Also, Ekananda is still there.
They're still there.
Yeah, he's running the archives.
I know
his wife.
know them from way back in India.
Yeah.
In the beginning there was Ekanath, and later on Ranjit came into the Surabi team.
Yeah.
And Surabi and I were...
I was kind of surprised that they moved the archives to such a remote